Well, Monkey House evolved organically out of a lot of songwriting I was doing in the early 90s at a studio called Marigold Productions in Toronto. I was doing all manner of stuff there, film stuff, advertising, pop, dance, R&B, rock and roll, co-producing stuff, co-writing stuff, and always arranging and sequencing stuff. And true to Canada's reputation for borderline socialism in the arts, there is a program up there called Factor, which is the Foundation to Assist Canadian Talent on Record. And they actually put federal funds into recording projects, which is not that unusual, except that in most countries that kind of funding goes toward jazz or indigenous music or classical music, but not necessarily to popular stuff. So in the course of working on a couple of projects there, I had contributed songs, and always I would end up with a few songs that really I would realize after the fact I had written kind of for myself. The ones with a few too many chords, maybe, by pop standards, and a little more improvising, maybe a little more funk. And so I would just kind of put those, there was a little batch of those that was growing on the sidelines when Rich Dodson, who you may know from the classic hit Sweet City Woman, he was the writer of that song, and also the proprietor of this studio, he suggested that we put me in for a Factor loan. And I said, well, yeah, I could see that, but I'm not really a band. I'm a contributor to a bunch of bands. And he said, well, all we need is a name for the project and some good demos of songs, which I did have on hand. So quickly cast around for a name and came up with Monkey House, which was taken from Welcome to the Monkey House, a Kurt Vonnegut collection of short stories. And so we put in, I think it was 3 songs, and they go through a couple of juries before you get approved for these things. But lo and behold, the money came through. I got the full album loan. And that's how we ended up doing Welcome to the Club, the first Monkey House album. I believe we started recording in early 92. It might even have been late 91. And the record ended up coming out on Aquarius Records, which was an EMI distributed label out of Montreal that had success over the years with a couple of different people, including April Wine, Corey Hart, and Sass Jordan, whose band I eventually toured with. I had a fan on the inside there, a great classic music guy, record guy named Keith Brown, who really championed me behind the scenes there and ended up getting me the full muscle of EMI. Well, actually, it was Capitol at the time in Canada by name. And so all the singles that came out from the record were out on samplers from EMI, and all the publicity, radio visits, and the like were sanctioned by EMI, which really helped put me on the map. And a few of the singles did very well. We were on the pop charts in Canada. We even got some rock airplay, and definitely in the adult contemporary realm. I think we had 3 tunes in the top 20 and maybe 4 tunes in the top 40 on the AC charts in Canada. Of course, that was back in the day when people like Michael McDonald and Steely Dan and Boz Scaggs were still core artists for that kind of station. So my stuff kind of made sense. That scene has moved on to, I guess, some kind of niche status now, because those big urban AC stations now play, hit music, basically Bruno Mars and Justin Timberlake and Katy Perry and all that stuff. So that was the kickoff for Monkey House. And I'm going to move on to the next clip and maybe talk about some of the individual songs. The songs from the first album that endured the best, I think, are the ones that had the best fundamentals. Just good melodies and hooks that stuck and things that sounded good for my voice because I was still at that point getting the hang of writing stuff for myself that I could deliver vocally convincingly. So, it's inevitable that 18, 19, 20 years later, you listen to the first record and you hear nothing but the warts and nothing but the misjudgments and mix mistakes and all that stuff. But I do know from being in touch with fans of this project that there is a lot of affection for that first batch of tunes. And I really appreciate that. And we've done that repertoire live over the years. And it always seems to click. Just Like Me, which was one of the singles from the album, is a song that I wrote probably around 1983 when I was at Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I used to be hiding away in the practice rooms there. And instead of doing my scales and my 2/5s and 12 keys, I would be songwriting furiously. So a couple of fragments and a couple of entire songs from that era survived into the Monkey House canon. We Never Knew Each Other is a particular favorite of mine. It was a little bit of a nod to acid jazz, which was a new thing then, where you could achieve a little bit of the loose swing of a jazz recording while still having a backbeat and the forward flow of a pop song. That song was also recorded by my then wife, Ricky Rumble, on her album a few years later called Strange Girl, and that's an interesting version as well. Big Money was the first single and really broke the band. I still talk to people that I've known for 10 years, and they suddenly have this epiphany. Oh, Big Money, that was you? I don't know, they treat me with more respect for about 3 seconds, and then we move on. The title song, Welcome to the Club, is one of the songs that was substantially reworked, remixed, it said, on the Big Money compilation back in 2005, but really it was pretty much a complete reinvention of the song's architecture. I think the rhythm guitar track and the original guitar solo survived, and the vocals the same. But pretty much everything else got hollowed out in an attempt to kind of create space in what was, I think, one of the busier tracks on the first album. One of the songs that I had almost forgotten about from the first album is Love's Last Stand, which I really am kind of liking these days. I might even attempt a remake of that one. The guitar player on it is Kevin Bright, who has played with Norah Jones and Katie Lang and a whole bunch of people. And he, if you know his playing, you recognize his kind of signature funky, slidey, almost peculiar sounding comping in it. A Matter of Moments was one of those songs that I think would not have made it onto a later Monkey House album, as I sort of got a better handle on what my sound was, but I still do like it. And it did get a lot of play on softer AC stations alongside, let's say James Taylor or that kind of thing. In all cases, I listen to that first album and think to myself, if only I'd had live drums and bass for the whole thing. But at that point, the budget meant that I had to really be careful of where we were going to spend our pennies on musicians' fees. So I prioritized live guitar and live horns because I just cannot stand synth brass. Well, a multi-tiered music career being what it is, the months turn into years, and your own project sometimes has trouble getting to the top of the pile. And so I did not undertake the follow-up to Welcome to the Club until a good 5 years later. And by that time, of course, I had accumulated another batch of songs that I figured I was the right person to deliver. Things that either I had specifically written for Monkey House, or things that I had maybe pitched to someone else and they couldn't see themselves inside that harmonic framework or delivering those words. So True Winter was the second album, and once again I worked with Marigold Productions, co-produced it with Rich Dodson, and availed myself of factor funding, which helped us make the record again. This one was a long one. I think it was 15 tracks. I don't have the track list in front of me, but it was longish. I just felt like I had gotten the song list down to a point where I couldn't cut anything else, and so we went with a kind of a huge batch. North was the lead-off track, probably one of the rockier tunes on the album, and a little mysterious in the lyric department. I can tell you that there's some question in people's minds, and I guess in my mind too, whether the narrator in the song is talking about going north physically or going somewhere emotionally or mentally, or actually checking out and dying. So ponder that as the words go by. But I do really enjoy that song to this day, and it's one of those ones where I can hear the seam in it, where the song North proper got melded with the hey la 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 kind of refrain, which had been a chunk of another song that never quite coalesced into anything 4 minutes long. But I think they married up nicely, and it gets its moment in the sun as the reprise at the end of the album, where I think it's just the guitars. Yeah, just the guitars, 2 or 3 layers of guitar playing that little theme. Good Company felt great at the time. The whole time we were working on the record, I thought it would be the lead-off track, and indeed it was one of the ones that people went to upon hearing the album for the first time. Funnily enough, it's never worked live that well, and I wonder if it's because the rhythmic architecture of it is so specific that it's kind of hard to duplicate with a live band. Road Movie is maybe my favorite song on this album to this day, and I think it smacks of Steely Dan, as some of my stuff does, but includes some great playing, among others. The drummer Richie Hayward from Little Feat is a guest star on that track. He and I had a mutual friend, the great drummer Rick Gratton from Toronto, who was also on several cuts on that album. And Richie was in Toronto doing a Little Feat show, which I believe I went to. I've seen them a bunch of times. And they had a down day on the road, and Rick arranged for him to come in and play on a couple of tracks on True Winter, which was a big thrill for me. Also on that track is some phenomenal jazz trumpet soloing on the tag by Tony Carlucci, who I had not had on a Monkey House recording before, but would go on later to work with extensively live and developing projects in the studio and for the road, etc., including our most recent band, which is called Brass Transit, and does a lot of Chicago repertoire and plays all over North America at casinos and festivals and soft seaters and that kind of thing. And that band is actually undertaking an album where we will be applying the kind of Chicago template with the thick vocals and the big brass features and the slick production, etc., to other songs from their era. So look for that. I think that'll be out within the year. Just looking down the song list now for True Winter. Big Red Sun is not one that gets talked about a lot, but I really do love that one. And it was written along with, I think, 2 or 3 other songs the night the first part of the Beatles anthology aired on television. I was just so inspired, as you would be, by watching the genesis of the Beatles and all those exceptional songwriters kind of bumping into each other creatively and talking about how the sparks used to fly. And so I sat down at the piano. I literally turned off that show, sat down at the piano, had the cassette player rolling, and wrote, I think it was 3 full songs and maybe a few other pieces that night. And Big Red Sun was the one that got on the Monkey House album. True Winter was released in 1998. I think I would have been working on it the year before. One of the songs, which is very date-stamped, and I knew it would be when I included it, is Predictions for the Year 2000. The millennium was starting to loom in popular culture at the time, and you would be standing in line at the grocery store and see one of those tabloids with that headline or something like it, Predictions for the Year 2000, and all the outlandish things that were going to happen. Of course, Sonny Bono died while we were making the record, so name-checking him in the lyric didn't work out quite so well. Well, we got really busy with the TV stuff shortly thereafter, and at some point I realized if I waited for another 12 or 14 songs worthy of a Monkey House record to get done, I might be waiting a long time, considering how busy I was. And so I took the 4 new songs that I had written and that I liked enough to put the Monkey House name on, and got those done, and then dug up the 2-inch masters of things from the first and second album and started messing around with that stuff, thinking that I could put it together into some kind of anthology that had some new stuff on it and some reworkings of the old stuff. So the end result of that was a CD called Big Money, and that was the first time I had put something out on my own label, Green Dolphin Music, GDM. The previous albums had been on Aquarius/EMI and on Marigold/Koch. So I was the label this time, but I had over the years kept in touch with a lot of people who had enjoyed the first couple of records, so I did have a little database and a little Monkey House community, if you will, that I thought might be waiting for the next thing. And turned out I was right, because the first run of that CD sold out quite quickly, and actually had a little bit of a hit from it as well, a song called Tough Love, which got AC play, but also play on the burgeoning radio format called smooth jazz, which was well established in the US by then, but just starting to happen in Canada at that point. I remember all these records are coming out of Toronto still. I also had a track on that album that goes over live always and seems to be a fan favorite, called The Difference Between New York and LA. And the genesis of that one is I was listening to a lot of stand-up comedy. I still am a big stand-up comedy nerd. The old cliches of stand-up that were being left behind were all those easy, low-hanging fruit type subjects, like the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, or the difference between men and women, or dogs and cats, or what have you, all that old hack stuff that people like Louis C.K. and Patton Oswalt and Greg Giraldo were leaving in the dust with really intelligent, original, amazing comedy with a real point of view. Anyway, so that's how that song came about, and I sort of warped that title into it's the story of a couple breaking up, and one partner is staying in New York, staying in the 212, and the other one is taking off to LA. It's funny, when I was writing it, I was picturing myself being the one who was staying in New York. But here I am, whatever it is, 8-9 years later, living in Los Angeles myself. As far as the other new songs on that album, there was a song called Mr. Tragic, which I really liked and was sort of written more from the power pop, maybe Elvis Costello, Jellyfish kind of perspective. And I admit now I had to shoehorn into being a kind of Monkey House groove a little bit, because what it really wanted to be was 2 guitars, bass, drums, poppy, English-sounding vocals. Anyway. And then there was subtitles, which I still like the words to a lot, and that's sort of a scaled-down, little bluesy song. A lot of the fun I had with the Big Money CD was reinvestigating the older music, pulling stuff out of it, adding stuff to it, and in some cases, just making one simple move, like extending the tag of True Winter, for example, which had lots of gold in it, but I guess we had faded on the True Winter album thinking that we were making some concession to it maybe getting some airplay at some point, which listening to it now seems a bit silly because it just doesn't feel like it was that airplay tune anyway, so you might as well let it go right out to the end. I like the interplay between all the different instruments soloing at the end there, just kind of going through and choosing which moment to feature. The Welcome to the Club remix, as I mentioned, was one of the more extreme ones. Just Like Me, I think we used the album mix. There were songs that I felt didn't need much more than a little remastering, and others that were crying out for some kind of deeper surgery. Headquarters, the last Monkey House album, which was out just last year, is the one I like the best. I think that's typical. People tend to like their most recent work the best, but in my case, I really do think that it makes sense, because Headquarters was the first Monkey House record where I wasn't hamstrung so much by budget and could avail myself of as many live players as I wanted to use and take as much time as I needed on the record. And I really think that all that detail and all that careful recording, arranging, editing, mixing really turned into something great. I'm still very proud of that record. 14 songs again. I can't seem to get the list down much shorter than that on these things, partially because they're generally collections of songs that have built up over a period of years and years. In the case of Headquarters, I led off with a song called Checkpoint Charlie because I felt like it was a crash course in Monkey House. All the stuff I was good at, all the stuff that was maybe my signature collection of sounds, it was all in that one tune. So if Headquarters was the first record someone heard, you just drop the needle on that tune and they'll know what the band's about. I began to collaborate a little bit on Headquarters. 2 of the songs were written with my brother Jeff, who's a great lyricist and lives in New York City. Where's Mantis Evar we wrote, and Second Avenue Subway. Mantis Evar, of course, is a real person. I get asked that all the time. He's a real guy and a cool guy and loves the fact that we wrote that song about him. The single from that album that really made some noise in the U.S. was Faith in the Middle, which featured Michael Lenhart, the trumpet player and music director from Steely Dan. That was a wonderful honor to have him play on the track, and I think that it sounded maybe a little sparser and more urban than some of the other tracks on the album, and so I think it ended up making sense to some stations that maybe hadn't played Monkey House before, which was great. You on the Brain also had a little bit of a life of its own because there was a YouTube clip that got thousands of hits and helped spread the word about that track. I think my favorite song from that album still is The Thinking Man's Me, which was the 6th or 7th track, I think, somewhere around the middle of the album. Just very proud of that one from a lyric and music standpoint. Another collaboration on that record was on the track Lebanon, which I co-wrote with Mark Jordan. All you got to do is Google Mark, and you'll see the incredible list of credits he's got as an artist and as a songwriter. He's just a wonderful singer and has written songs for dozens of people you've heard of. Still writing with Mark, and we'll likely have at least one more collaboration on the next Monkey House album, which is already in pre-production as we speak here in October of 2013. The Man You Love to Hate featured Kim Mitchell, the great rock guitarist from Canada. I had at that point just finished about a 4 or 5 year stint in Kim's band, and I think he to this day has the distinction of being the loudest overdub ever on a Monkey House recording. The walls were shaking in the studio that day. And speaking of classic rock guitarists, of course Rick Emmett, who is the founder of Triumph, is also on the record, and he played on the track Too Much, Too Much. Drew Zing, also formerly of Steely Dan and currently of Boz Scaggs' band, is featured on Where's Mantis Evar, and I think if you know his playing, you know within a phrase or two that it's him. He's just such a wonderful, soulful, bluesy guitar player, but unlike a lot of guys who have that soulful phrasing and bluesy kind of attitude under their fingers, he can play changes like nobody's business. It's just all over the perfect note on the perfect change. There is one finished mix from Headquarters that did not make the record, a track called I'm Not That Guy. And I really like the way the song turned out, and my friend Dave Dunlop played great guitar on it. But when it came time to sequence the album, put the songs in order, it never seemed to be able to find the right home. I tried, in collaboration with my two sons, a lot of different track orders for the record, and it seemed like wherever that one ended up, it was the wrong place. So finally I thought, well, maybe it's trying to tell me something, and I just left it off the record, but I'm happy now that it's found a home. Apart from I'm Not That Guy, the additional bonus tracks on this record that have never been released before are all part of an instrumental project that I had undertaken and actually never finished, I guess sometime around the middle of the aughts. And I had started out with the idea that it would be interesting to compose some Monkey House songs in the way that I used to compose jazz heads, where it's just a freestanding melodic harmonic entity, and then I would graft on the vocal end of it, the melody, the words, after the fact. Well, a couple of those tracks, thanks to my friends at a radio station called The Wave, which existed in the Toronto area at the time, got some play and got on a few people's radar. I know from emails I've had about those tracks. And even though I had conceived them all as Monkey House, I started to realize that maybe they were self-sufficient and they were meant just to be instrumentals. So most of them were kind of in-the-box productions, with me doing everything. They have a kind of personality to them because of that. They all definitely sound like they're from the same batch. And they tend to be instrumentals around a certain concept, like can I get groupings of 5 into something that's still a bit of a foot stomper groove? Can I do something melodically that's like a melody from a 50s horror movie theme and strap that onto a funk groove and see if it goes somewhere? One of the tracks, called Newbury Street, was a little nod to my days in Boston. And I think out of anything in that little group of instrumentals, probably got the most airplay and attention. But I like all the stuff, and I hope you will too. I mean, I'm including it in this package because I think it's of interest from a Monkey House perspective and has a lot of the same building blocks as Monkey House vocal tunes, even though they're a slightly different species. It occurred to me while I was sort of going through the archives and seeing what I had that I still liked that hadn't been released, that there was this group of songs from that era that I thought deserved a listen. And in any case, they're sort of tacked into this package as bonus material. Maybe someday one or two of them will end up with vocal content. We'll see.